Now this is the mind map for the salt chapter. Now for salt, first thing we need to know is what is a salt. Now all salts are ionic compounds, and they contain positive metal ions and negative non-metal ions. So there must be a positive metal ion as well as a non-metal ion. So positive metal ion would be for example potassium. Okay, potassium ion, for example, potassium ion K+, and the non-metal ions would be, for example, chloride ions, because chlorine is a non-metal. So if you put them together, that would be potassium chloride, and potassium chloride is an example of a salt, and it is an ionic compound because it consists of potassium ion as well as the chloride ion. Now, how is salt being formed? Now, salt is formed when metallic or ammonium ion replaces H+ ions of acid. So salt actually comes from an acid. So for example, you have hydrochloric acid, for example. Now this hydrochloric acid basically consists of hydrogen ion as well as chloride ion. So what happens is when this hydrogen ion is replaced by a metallic or ammonium ion, when it is replaced by, for example, potassium ion, then it becomes potassium chloride. So this is how salt is being formed. When the hydrogen ion of an acid is replaced by a metallic ion or ammonium ion. For example, if it is replaced by ammonium ion NH4+, then that would become NH4 plus Cl, ammonium chloride. And ammonium chloride is an example of a salt. Now another example would be, for example, this thing called nitric acid. Nitric acid is an example of an acid, and nitric acid consists of hydrogen ion as well as nitrate ion. And when this hydrogen ion is replaced by a metallic ion or an ammonium ion, then a salt is being formed. Okay, an example would be it is replaced by zinc ion. And zinc ion, when the hydrogen ion is replaced by zinc ion, what is formed is zinc nitrate. Okay, so this is the formation of a salt. Now for salt, you need to know that when salt combines with water molecules to form crystals, and the crystal and the salt is known as hydrated salt. So hydrated salt, that means it is a wet salt. There is water molecule inside, and the water molecule is called water of crystallization. And the water in the hydrated salt can be removed through heating. And when you heat a wet salt, it becomes a dry salt, and the dry salt is called anhydrous salt. That means it is a dry salt and inside there is no water molecules. Okay, so an example would be hydrated salt would be like this. Now there is a dot here, that means this salt has water inside. When there is no dot, that means it has no water inside. Now the next thing that we look at is the solubilities of salt. Some salt is soluble, some salt is not soluble. Now this is called the solubility table. It is extremely important. It will tell you which kind of salt is soluble in water, which kind of salt is not soluble in water. Okay, soluble salt. So all the sodium salts, potassium salt, ammonium salt and nitrate salt, all of them are soluble. So an example would be when you have, for example, sodium something. For example, you have sodium chloride. It is a sodium salt, and over here it says that all sodium salt is soluble. So sodium chloride is soluble. So sodium, whatever rubbish it is, must be soluble. Sodium sulfate also, it must be soluble. Same thing for potassium, ammonium as well as nitrate. Okay, potassium, for example, potassium chloride, ammonium sulfate, for example, nitrate, like ammonium nitrate, all these are soluble. Alright, how about for chlorides? So all chlorides are soluble except lead 2 chloride and silver chloride. This is lead 2 chloride, this is silver chloride. So all the chlorides are soluble except these two, meaning that all the potassium chloride, calcium chloride, barium chloride, ammonium chloride, all are soluble except these two. And then for sulfate, all sulfates are soluble except these three. Now calcium sulfate, even though it is sparingly soluble, it is also considered insoluble. So these three sulfates are insoluble. The rest of the sulfates all soluble. And then for carbonates, all carbonates is insoluble. Okay, all carbonates, it is insoluble except the group 1 carbonate as well as ammonium carbonate, except sodium carbonate, potassium carbonates, which are the group 1 metals. So all the group 1 carbonates are soluble as well as ammonium carbonate. Anyway, it's mentioned here, all sodium, potassium, ammonium salt, all are soluble. Sodium, potassium, ammonium salt, they are all soluble. And then lastly, hydroxide. Even though hydroxide is not a salt, still you have to know the solubility. So all hydroxides are not soluble except group 1, 2 and ammonium hydroxide. Okay, group 1, for example, sodium is in group 1 of the periodic table, so sodium hydroxide is soluble. For group 2 elements, for example calcium, so calcium hydroxide is also soluble. Barium hydroxide, it is also soluble. Okay, group 1, 2 and ammonium hydroxide. So generally all the group 1 salt are soluble. Okay, sodium, whatever thing it is, must be soluble. Potassium, whatever shit is it, must be soluble, because potassium and sodium are in group 1. And I said it again, group 1 salts are all soluble. Now you need to know this solubility of salt, because especially for the second part of the mind map, there's the page 2 of the mind map.